They say your birthday is the one day you're meant to feel special. A day where the world pauses, even briefly, to acknowledge your existence. But what happens when that day feels empty? When the messages feel distant, the celebration feels performative, and the attention feels strangely uncomfortable? For some, birthdays are not a source of joy, but a quiet reminder of something missing. A silent disconnect. A day that highlights not what is present, but what is absent. Why do some people withdraw from their own celebration? Why does being seen feel heavier than being ignored? This is the silent psychology behind people who don't care about their birthday. Let's begin.
There is a certain stillness that arrives when your birthday approaches. Not the peaceful kind, but something quieter, emptier. No countdown, no anticipation. Just another day, slowly making its way towards you, without meaning. You notice how others talk about their birthdays, with a kind of lightness, even excitement. Plans, surprises, expectations. And yet, when it comes to your own, there is a distance. As if the day belongs to someone else, not you. Why does it feel that way? Why does something meant to celebrate your existence feel so emotionally neutral or even heavy? Sometimes it's not sadness. It's something more subtle than that. A kind of emotional flatness, like an empty well that no longer echoes when something is dropped into it. Messages come in. Happy birthday. Simple, kind, expected. And yet, instead of warmth, there is a quiet discomfort. A sense that you are being seen, but not.
Emotional disconnection rarely appears without a history. It forms slowly, like sediment settling at the bottom of a river, layer by layer, until the water no longer feels clear. For some, birthdays were never truly theirs to begin with. They were rushed, forgotten, or quietly overshadowed by louder moments, louder people, louder needs. Maybe the day came and went without much notice. No rituals, no pause, no feeling that your presence shifted anything. Or perhaps it was acknowledged, but in a way that felt conditional. Attention that depended on behavior. Warmth that felt rehearsed. A celebration that existed but never quite reached you. And something subtle begins to happen in moments like these. A quiet conclusion forms, not in words, but in feeling. That your existence is not something to be marked, not something to be held. So the mind adapts. It learns not to expect. Because expectation, when unmet, feels like erosion, slowly wearing away at something fragile inside you. It becomes easier to lower the meaning of the day than to feel the absence of it. Over time, this becomes internalized, not as a memory, but as a pattern. You stop seeing your birthday as something significant, because somewhere along the way, it stopped feeling significant to others. And even if the present is different, even if people now try, care, remember, the past doesn't disappear. It lingers quietly beneath the surface. The mind is not indifferent without reason. What looks like not caring is often something far more precise: protection. Because to be seen is to be exposed. And for some, exposure has never felt entirely safe. When attention arrives, even in its kindest form, something inside you tightens. Not because the moment is negative, but because your system has learned to associate visibility with vulnerability. It's subtle. A message comes in, and instead of warmth, there is pressure. A gathering is suggested, and instead of excitement, there is resistance. Not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet pull inward. Why? Because attention asks something from you. It asks you to respond, to feel. Beneath the quiet detachment, there is often something more complicated. Not indifference, but contradiction. Because even when you say you don't care, a small part of you still wonders, what would it feel like to be genuinely celebrated, to be remembered without reminders, valued without conditions? That question doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it appears in brief moments, when you see others being surprised, appreciated, held in ways that feel effortless. And for a second, something shifts, a flicker, a quiet ache. But almost immediately, something else follows. Discomfort. A tightening that pulls you back inward, reminding you not to linger there too long. Because wanting something you've learned to live without feels dangerous. So you do what has become familiar. You dismiss it. It doesn't matter. It's just another day. And maybe part of that is true, but another part is protecting something fragile. This is the conflict. The coexistence of two opposing truths. A quiet longing to feel seen.
There comes a point where the distance begins to feel noticeable. Not painful in a sharp way, but present, like a quiet echo that doesn't fully fade. And in that space, something subtle begins to shift. Not a sudden change, not a dramatic realization, but a soft questioning of what the day has come to represent. Because for a long time, meaning was placed outside of you, in how others remembered, in how they expressed, in how visible you felt in their eyes. And when that external reflection felt inconsistent, the meaning of the day slowly dissolved with it. But what happens when that pattern is seen clearly? When the silence is no longer just endured, but understood? The question begins to change. Not, why don't they make it feel special? But what does this day actually mean to me? And that question is quieter, less dependent, more uncertain, but also more honest. Because significance was never meant to be carried entirely by others. It was never meant to rely solely on recognition from the outside world. It begins somewhere deeper, in the way you relate to your own existence, in whether your presence feels acknowledged, even in stillness. This doesn't. In the end, it was never really about the birthday. Not the messages, not the plans, not even the absence of them. It was about what the day revealed, quietly, without asking for attention. A reflection of how you learned to relate to your own existence, how you learned to measure your presence through the responses of others, and how, over time, that measurement began to fade. But here is something rarely spoken. Detachment is not emptiness. It is often something that formed in response to it, a kind of emotional adaptation, a way of carrying yourself through moments that once felt uncertain, inconsistent, or quietly disappointing. And there is nothing inherently wrong with that, because every form of distance has a history,